Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During this week's show, we're going to cover two topics. The first one is going to be some exciting new developments, actually, in the IT world in Armenia. And then we're going to close with looking at the recent announcement of the arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Israeli Defense Minister Gantz, and what that could mean for Armenia and the region. On the IT front, there's actually been three significant developments over the last 10 days, which we're going to review. The first one was the big news, which was ServiceTitan, which is one of the big IT firms in Armenia that's actually started in the United States, founded by Armenians, but it has a significant presence in Armenia, so a lot of their work actually gets done in Armenia. They announced that they're going public, and they're going to be issuing stocks. I think that the timeline is actually in December in Wall Street in New York. From what I've read, their expected valuation, which becomes clear at the end of the first day, is going to be somewhere between $8 to $12 billion, depending on who you believe. What that actually means is that there will be many, many people in that company, and actually many of them in Armenia, that will become very wealthy at the end of that first day because they all own stock options from that company. Then we move on to the second news, which is there's an Armenian company, SuperAnnotate, which is actually in the AI field, and they got a $36 million investment, partly from Nvidia, which is the number one AI firm in the world, actually has a valuation of over $2 trillion. And what this actually means in real terms is that they're actually on their way to becoming our third locally Armenia-funded unicorn. For people who do not know, a unicorn company is a company that has a valuation of over $1 billion. And once they achieve that, they'll be joining the two other unicorns that we have, which is Crisp and Pixart. And lastly, there was an announcement which was actually quite interesting, which was there's a company called Levy Semiconductors that made a deal, a memorandum that was signed with the Ministry of Technology, which is actually doing a lot of good work now, in establishing the first plant in Armenia that is engaged in pure production of multi-component semiconductors and silicon photo-optical microchips. This is part of a $34 million investment that will actually establish the production of semiconductors for the first time in Armenia. This will create approximately 86 new jobs in Armenia, 50 of them, more importantly, which will be in the research and development sector. In analyzing all of this, I think we need to understand that the IT actually has it's not just business, actually, it's a very distinct political angle to it because of the wealth that's created in IT. Actually, the centers of powers in the world is in many ways in the IT world. And actually, a good example of that was one of the guest commentators and speakers actually on the WCIT this year, which is the big tech summit, was actually none other than Elon Musk, which is actually in many ways the biggest name in IT and the business world today. Having access and success in IT also means that you actually have a backdoor to the halls of power in what is still the most important country in the world, which is the United States. And further than that, I think we have a tendency to look at heroes as only people who carry guns, and that's actually a lot of truth to that. They are heroes, but anybody today that actually makes this country wealthier is actually a hero. And because at the end of the day, a richer Armenia is a stronger and secure Armenia. And success in IT is one of the key ways of getting there. Now we're going to move on to the second topic of the week, which is the ICC indictments against Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and the former Defense Minister of Israel. In so many words, the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court, issued arrest warrants for the two of them, basically on a genocide charge, but specifically on a charge of starvation. Of starving the people of Gaza. And what was interesting about the specific charges, they actually mentioned his words, in which he actually, in a press conference, said that they're going to be starving the people of Gaza, or that's a weapon that they're going to be using. Now, what's very interesting is that we have some local neighborhood hoodlums that have actually used very similar language. What this means in technical terms, that in 120 countries that are members of the ICC, and Armenia is one of them, most of these countries being in pretty much all of Europe, most of South America, and good parts of Africa, if any of these people, if either of them actually step foot in any of these countries, they would have to be arrested. Now, whether they are arrested or not is a completely different matter, because that frankly depends on the political pull that your country has. The reality is that if the ICC is actually willing to indict Vladimir Putin, Benjamin Netanyahu, and some other minor figures, but let's focus on the major ones, all of our local neighborhood criminals are actually political peasants compared to them. In real terms, it is highly unlikely that Netanyahu will ever face justice in The Hague. But for the rest of their lives, this is a scarlet letter that's going to be stamped on their heads. And in many ways, they'll literally have to spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders and essentially be treated for being career criminals. Now let's get to what this means for us. If Armenia or any of the other 120 members of the ICC actually decide to file complaints or initiate an investigation into the invasion and the war crimes that were committed in Armenia in 22, in Jermuk and other places, and obviously the ethnic cleansing and the genocide of Artsakh last year, there's actually a very good chance, based on statements made and actions, that the regime or regime officials in Baku will be charged with genocide. Just the truth of the matter is, just the fact that this could happen is enough to deter or make Ilham Aliyev think multiple times before he does any further aggression. So this is the direction that we should be moving in. At the end of the day, there's not much point in being a dictator or being the owner of a gas station masquerading as a country if you can't visit the $600 million of properties you have in London, or your wife can't go on her shopping trips to Paris. The only road to peace for us is two things: strength and the criminalization of the regime in Baku. Filing ICC charges against the regime in Baku is not about justice at this point. It's a matter of security. In conclusion, we need to understand the following thing about our enemy's political system. In essence, when you're looking at the political system in Baku, you're actually dealing with a beehive where everything is designed to protect the queen. What happens to the 7 million worker bees does not matter at all. You actually want that country to behave. You threaten the queen and his family's privileges. You want them to free the hostages, threaten to or file with the ICC. You want them to sign your so-called peace treaty, threaten or file with the ICC. You don't want aggressions next year, threaten or file with the ICC, because on this particular point, there's a catch-22. Because if you file and he actually does aggressions, it actually guarantees his indictment, which pretty much will prevent him from doing so. The reality is that force, threats, blackmail, and Bolshevik methods is the only language these people understand, and not the language of peace agendas. Thank you for joining me in this week's Set of Insights.
The band leader said no. So the next day, my father went to see him, only this time with Luca Brazzi. Within an hour, he signed a release for a certified check of $1,000.
How did he do that?
My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
What was that?
Luca Brazzi held a gun to his head, and my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract. It's a true story.